Great presentations. Interested in the interconnect space, where you see it going, the high end and the low end, active optical cables or 10G based T.
I'll go first and then you go. That's all right. So for the, I just don't know where to go. Yeah, so we've been tracking that very closely, and what we do is we split the market for, first of all, from all Ethernet-based ones, InfiniBand, and custom ones, and proprietary. The custom proprietary ones are shrinking away. Ethernet-based ones are staying around half the market, and we see InfiniBand growing the most. At the very high end of the market, though, we're expecting to see some new custom implementations, and we're aware of 6 different programs around the world that are developing new interconnects. As Addison mentioned, T Platforms is doing it, and I can't mention the other vendors because they're still under NDA, but there's actually 6 separate programs around the world right now to do new custom high-end interconnects. The Chinese system, the new top one, for example, has its own custom interconnect with its own network and leaf parts to it. But we see that the interconnect part of the market is going to be very dynamic right now.
So you see it going back towards custom?
Right now, our current forecasts still show the proprietary portion shrinking, but if you look at just the high end of the market, we think that then custom is going to grow quite dramatically.
Other questions? Anyone?
Actually, that was a pretty good answer. Without getting into quibbles about 1% or 2 here or there, we would agree with the basic trends. The interesting thing with Ethernet that I'll add is that we do see Ethernet share sort of historically has pulsed depending on when there's a new version of Ethernet out. And as we go into 10 gig, we'll see a surge in Ethernet installations as that gets older and before you get into the next one down the road, and you'll have FDR and other things hit on the InfiniBand side. So those should pulse back and forth. But that's just adding to what Earl said.
So 10 gig is a very small part of that Ethernet you're talking about.
Well, yes, 10 gig is a small portion now, but as it becomes standard, you'll see an increase in Ethernet adoptions. I didn't mean standard. As it comes down in price, it becomes the main Ethernet version.
Yeah, one view we have, agree with the standard part in our definition is when somebody starts putting it on the boards. So if it's on the blade, if it's on the motherboards, then it's kind of pervasive at that point.
Well, it's on the blade.
In some situations.
Cross HP. That's half the mark.
Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing relative to small usage of it so far. The pricing on it is very high.
Question here.
Earl, you have a figure showing a lot of growth in the high-end supercomputers in 09. How much of that was the result of the stimulus spending here in the U.S.? But also, you mentioned about China and competitive issue between countries and whatnot. So how much of a driver is that going to be for HPC spending by national governments? And does your estimates reflect, and it goes for Addison as well, your estimates at all reflect some of the political dynamic that could come into play?
Sure. So a couple questions in there. First of all, the amount of stimulus money, we are tracking as a separate program the stimulus money in the U.S. and Europe, and how much of that is actually making its way all the way into an HPC system. And that's a separate entire data structure that we have. The stimulus money during that window was actually relatively small. There was only a few handful of machines because the money had not worked its way through the system yet. So the big growth that you saw there was not so much stimulus spend, but programs that were already in place and already rolling through. We do expect, though, to see the stimulus spend to have more of an impact in the next year or two spending. And we also we've already been told by Europe that they think they found 200 million out of the 600 million extra spend we're talking about. And for example, at our recent user forum meeting at HRLS is going from having a $30 million system to something over 100 million. And a big thing that Michael Resch presented is he said the cost of being a leading edge supercomputer center has just changed by a factor of 3 for him. And he said that's pervasive across Europe. So we expect the growth rate to continue to be very strong, especially in the US and Europe, because there's a lot of what I call stimulus money. But then when you flip it to China, China's on a different scale right now as far as what they're spending. This morning they said their large systems are also on the order of 100 million. We've done some costing. We think they're actually a little higher than that, but that's the relative playing field. Our numbers do not include at this time the large proposals with the Department of Energy. We realize that we're talking multiple billion-dollar systems there. We do expect right now, if I showed our 10-year forecast, you would see some very unusual parts of the curve because we start dropping in some billion-dollar systems. We actually think there's a high likelihood that in 1 year there'll be 2 $1 billion or larger machines sold. So we think that the dynamic at the high end of the market is going to be a true roller coaster, but it's a roller coaster on this really high growth curve. So I think I have answered at least 3/4 of your questions.
We have time for maybe one more question here.
So I guess this would be for both Earl and Addison. Earl, you guys did this report for Europe and their plans for HPC. Is there a similar kind of effort in the U.S.? And if not, should there be?
Yes, right now, I can't say which agencies within the U.S., but we're speaking with multiple different agencies within the U.S. to fund a very similar type study. The U.S. and Europe are very different as far as their government organizations. The EU actually is much more hands-off on these type studies, so they actually wanted us to recommend down to the dollar who's going to spend the money in that. The U.S. doesn't really want an outsider saying, here's what you do in that detail. But we are presenting that. We're actually presenting 3 different studies to address 3 parts of the problem. So I'm hoping, and the nice thing about the U.S. government studies is once they're finished, everyone gets them for free. For example, the DOE will be announcing or launching one of the studies we just completed on the HPC skill and talent shortage in the industry. We just did a very large scale one. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, we certainly hope there will be those kinds of studies. We think it's a great idea. And then in terms of national response to large Chinese and also Japanese supercomputer at number 4, when it's all over the popular press, the 3 out of the top 4 supercomputers in the world, according to how they measure it, are in Asia, there is no way there's not a response in Congress to that. Because, I mean, there's a response. Now, you can get into all kinds of technical arguments over whether that's the most efficient machine or not, but people are looking at it. Number 1 equals China. And then furthermore, there's a big Chinese initiative to go beyond what they've accomplished, leveraging their very large workforce in terms of low-cost manufacturing, to reinvent their education system and their economy to be more skill-based again around these professional and qualified people, similar to what India did to its economy with the IITs over the last 50 years. Now that's not something that happens instantaneously. It takes a generation or 2 to kick in. But the fact that the Chinese government has stated that that's a national initiative at the same time they're building out their petascale infrastructure is certain to have caught a lot of attention in the U.S. at a lot of levels. So absolutely there's going to be a response. Absolutely, Rich, we would love to study it. It's not yet formulated exactly what formula it'll take.
We have the VIP press